Entrepreneurially Thinking is a presentation of BioSTL and CET, Center for Emerging Technologies, with RareGem Productions, changing the way you view new ventures, including you on the pathway to success with your business in the St. Louis marketplace and beyond. Here's your hosts, Cheryl and Christy. Now let's get thinking entrepreneurially.
Welcome to the Entrepreneurially Thinking podcast. Our goal is to energize your entrepreneurial mindset and create pathways for business success in the St. Louis marketplace and beyond. I'm Christy Maxfield, Director of Entrepreneur Development Services at the Center for Emerging Technologies.
And I'm Dr. Cheryl Watkins-Moore, the Director of Bioscience and Entrepreneurial Inclusion. Hey, Christy.
Welcome back.
Yes, I'm happy to be back.
Every time we come into the studio, we're stepping outside our comfort zone and invite you to join us on the journey. We want to help you look at your career and business in new ways. Together, we can take the constraints off how you view current and future endeavors. You can join and stay in touch with the Entrepreneurially Thinking community on all your favorite online streaming platforms, on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, or by visiting our website at entrepreneuriallythinking.com, #ETHINKSTL.
Well, today, Christy, I think we have a really enjoyable show today for folks, so stay tuned, as I always tell you. We're talking about entrepreneurship as a pathway to prosperity for job seekers who are often limited in their career choices due to education, experience, and in some cases, involvement in the justice system.
Yes.
We have invited former State Senator Jeff Smith, Executive Vice President of Community Engagement and Policy with Concordance Academy of Leadership, and Jason Watson, the Director of the Beyond Jobs program at Mission St. Louis, to talk about their programs and the people they serve. What is so funny is that I met Jason's executive director of Mission St. Louis, and he was actually my neighbor. I saw his truck in my neighborhood.
It's good to know who you're hanging out with.
It's really good to know. So after this quick break, we'll come back and talk about how Concordance Academy and Mission St. Louis use a leadership training and life skills approach to empower men and women through job training, a community of support and employment opportunities so they can access legal, livable wage jobs, including self-employment. Really excited about this. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Now here's Make It Happen with Keith Sales Pro.
As an entrepreneur, I've learned these 4 things that no one tells you about entrepreneurship. Number 1, there is a sense of isolation that is really profound. We're all used to being part of a reference group. When you're an employee of an established business, you have colleagues. When you're in college, you have classmates. Number 2, most businesses provide a lifestyle and a job, but they don't provide wealth. For example, most restaurant owners probably take home an income that is not much greater than that made by a restaurant manager at a popular chain. Number 3, it usually takes many years to build a business. I've run several businesses in my lifetime. Very simple businesses, moderately simple businesses, and very complicated businesses. Number 4, you have to manage people. When running a business, you're constantly managing not just employees and vendors, but customers as well. If you love what you're doing and you like business, being an entrepreneur could be a great thing. It's certainly good for the country, but recognize that it may not live up to the picture painted in the popular media.
Today, remember, it can happen. It will happen. And together, we will make it happen.
Follow Keith Sales Pro on Facebook or Twitter at Keith Sales Pro, or visit his website at keithsalespro.com.
It can happen. It will happen. And together, we will make it happen.
I'm Jeff Smith. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. And to me, entrepreneurial thinking means figuring out ways to do more with less, sometimes even nothing.
Jeff and Jason, thank you for joining us. Jason, you and I had the pleasure of meeting when I visited Mission STL's new facility up on North Grand. Mm-hmm. And I know that Mission St. Louis has really created interventions for 2 of the most powerful stages in the poverty cycle, the high school graduation inflection point and the recidivism inflection point. Can you tell us about yourself, Mission STL, and what kind of work you're doing with Beyond Jobs?
Absolutely. First, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely.
It's been great. You guys are really funny, by the way.
Well, we also share a brain, so we will say things in unison. We will probably try to crack the same joke.
Right.
Absolutely.
Or just point out when one of us deserves to be laughed at.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
I'm
That's
glad you
synergy.
enjoy our humor.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. Well, I'm born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, grew up in the Walnut Park area, and there is nothing in my life that says I should be sitting here talking about entrepreneurship.
Really?
Although I was always an entrepreneur in some way, because I started selling drugs at a very, very young age.
Okay.
All that to say, that gives me a heartbeat for the guys that I serve, because I come from where they come from. I've done the things they've done, and some of those things I can't communicate on this podcast.
Understood, sir.
But you know what? I've always said that, you know what? Our young men that are out here and women that are out here selling drugs are CEOs.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just an illegal activity, but they are bright people. If
No
you
doubt.
look at marketing, distribution,
Absolutely.
pricing, and all of that, they have all the same.
Absolutely.
Core competencies.
Absolutely. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I can sell water to a well. I get it.
I'm stealing that one. Ice to an Eskimo, but water to a well?
Absolutely. So, Mission St. Louis, our heartbeat is really empowerment, and we know we hear that word thrown around a lot. However, we believe empowerment is allowing people not to be dependent upon us, right? So, putting them in opportunities and situations where they can provide for themselves, fend for themselves, and do for themselves. And they don't have to continue to circle around and ask for stuff from us. So we have two portions of what we do. One is Beyond Jobs, the Job and Leadership Training Program, where we work with men between the ages of 22 to 35. We take them through a real intense boot camp teaching job training, financial literacy, as well as manhood. And as we begin doing that and have seen, the transformation that's happening in the lives of the men that we serve, these guys are beginning to hit ceilings in their jobs, and they're realizing, am I going to be working this job for the rest of my life?
Right.
And they're coming to us saying, well, what else can we do? And that's what
great.
gave us a heartbeat to launch Hatch Enterprises, which is our business incubator, and just wanting to take men and women from under-resourced communities and provide them opportunities to jumpstart businesses that they have a heartbeat for.
I think what you said is just so powerful, because I think in a lot of people's mindsets, they think, people who come from poor communities or don't have their educational resources, they don't want to work, they don't want to do anything, they just want to live off the system. And what you just said is very powerful, because you're teaching them about employment. They get employed and find out there's a ceiling, but they do want more.
Absolutely.
So it's not for the lack of desire and ambition. It's really the ceiling that sometimes stops.
Well, I know some people may not understand it, but you gotta want more if you're gonna stand in the middle of a neighborhood, possibly have to shoot at somebody, get shot at, right? Go to jail, run from police, all of these things to make money. Now, I'm not saying I condone that. I'm just saying that means you want something, right? The question is, do you see a pathway to get it other than the way by which you've been doing?
Exactly.
And that's really what we're trying to encourage guys to recognize, that those skills that you've learned in those environments are transferable in corporate America. Now, in corporate America, people get their head chopped off. It just looks different.
Absolutely.
People get shot. It's just not bullets and you bleed, right?
Exactly.
People take over corporations. They take over. We're talking about behind people's backs.
Exactly.
This happens on the neighborhoods and in the blocks that we serve and the guys that we serve. It's the same kind of idea.
It's mirroring, absolutely. It's mirroring the same activities. The difference is, that might be no difference, because there's white-collar crime, too.
Absolutely.
And they go to jail, but from a different perspective.
And white-collar crime is looked at differently.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So I watch a lot of Greed. I'm real big on shows like that. So the damage that has happened, even from that perspective, is very important. So
no doubt.
So we have guys that definitely have a heartbeat to not only start businesses, but to be able to employ those who come from the environments that they come from. So the reality is, if I can't get a job because I have a felony on my record, then that means I need to create something for guys who come from my background, who come from where I come from, so that I can provide opportunities for them as well.
And I think being able to visualize that pathway, so much of what we talk about is regardless of where you are, where you're working or not working, what your background is, what your family experience has been. It's about actually helping people see that there's something bigger and beyond what they've experienced in a day-to-day situation.
Right. Absolutely.
Jeff, how does your organization, how does Concordance Academy help people find that pathway?
Mm-hmm.
So we work exclusive, and thank you for having me as well. And I could just sit here and listen to Jason all day, really, for real. But so we work with people who have just been released from prison, and actually we work with them during their final year inside of prison.
Oh, okay.
And in prison, as I can attest, you develop a lot of habits that are not real healthy for when you come out, right? You learn not to show any emotion. You numb yourself because any show of emotion inside prison
is dangerous.
It's a sign of weakness. And the last thing you want to do is look weak. In prison, you learn to distrust everybody around you. You know, you don't trust fellow prisoners. You don't trust the COs, definitely. And taking that kind of fear and distrust out into the world is not healthy. You pick up all these habits. You develop a tendency to overreact to the smallest slight, because if someone cuts ahead of you in line at the chow hall and you don't step to them, again, everyone sees you're weak, and then predators will come and try to do something else to you. And so all the things that you develop inside the justice system as survival mechanisms make you totally dysfunctional when you come out and you try to function in a workplace.
And you probably went in with some level of trauma to begin with. So now
Almost
we've just
everybody. Yeah.
Now we've just added a whole nother layer to it.
Exactly. So just about everyone in our program experienced some, extraordinary trauma. Watching close relatives die in the street, being shot point blank in the face, one of our first guys who came out. So and then of course, that's exacerbated while they're incarcerated. So we work with them during their final year, first on a therapeutic way to just get them to open up again and begin seeing that there's constructive ways to express emotion that are healthy and are not weak, but are actually a sign of emotional strength to be able to do that.
It's almost like these guys and women are suffering from PTSD.
Yes.
Having not gone to war,
Absolutely.
It's the same type of symptomatology, it sounds like.
It's funny you say that, Cheryl, because our program was designed by a group of scholars at Washington University who looked at over 100,000 different programs that had been dealing with several different populations who suffered from PTSD. People coming home from war, refugees from war-torn countries, women leaving violent, abusive relationships, and people coming home from prison, with the theory that they were identifying the same post-traumatic symptoms in all these populations. And so they looked at over 100,000 programs, found approximately 1,000 that had been shown by a third-party review to be effective, and then isolated 34 separate interventions that had been tried that seemed to be common to those effective programs. And we've bundled those 34 into what we're doing at Concordance. So working with guys in their final year of prison to develop a life plan with a career blueprint, then matching them when they get out to employers in the fields that they're interested in. So say if you were a prison cook, then we've got employers like Bailey's and Pie, Bailey's Range, or 33, the chocolate bar, or Pie Pizzeria.
I need to stay out of there. I eat both of those.
Actually, you need to go there because you see they're doing great things in the community by partnering with associates.
Yes.
All we need is an excuse.
Yes, we're both foodies, okay?
And so our guys are, we're working on a now, next, later employment model where, what can you do now? Maybe you can go to Pie and be, like short order cook. And then your next job, maybe you could run the kitchen at a place like that. And maybe later your dream is to own your own restaurant. And
aspirations.
So we teach that pathway.
And it's great that you have the employers that are aligned with the philosophy and the vision of what Concordance is doing, because sometimes some of our employers, I think, I don't want to deal with that population because of all the stigmas attached to it. But just like you said, if we don't start incorporating, and that's what we talk about on this podcast, is that for entrepreneurship to really flourish in St. Louis, we can't leave any populations behind. We have to make sure that everyone is engaged, because that's how innovation it develops. That's how,
jobs get created.
Absolutely.
Well, when you look at the development of America, people from all nations have played a huge role in what this country has become. So if you remove any of those populations, most of what we have does not exist.
Right.
And I really believe that the biggest source of untapped entrepreneurial talent in our society is people coming home from prison. As you alluded to earlier, Cheryl, look, inside prison, there is no concept that you would learn at Wharton that you could not learn inside prison.
Probably
Whether
more
it's-
effectively.
Yeah,
Exactly.
like new product
Real
launch,
time.
quality control, supply chain management, territorial expansion. I heard every single one of these concepts explained lucidly and succinctly in the jargon of the drug trade.
Yes.
But,
Absolutely.
you know, the sad thing was that where I was incarcerated, this isn't true everywhere, but there was no training to teach people how to translate their intuitive grasp of these business concepts into a legitimate enterprise.
Absolutely.
Well, and not that it's the same experience per se, but even coming home from serving in the military, there's also this big disconnect between what I've learned and what I've experienced, both good and bad in that setting, and then what has it taught me in terms of resilience, ingenuity, and transferable skills that would allow me to thrive in a civilian setting.
So if you think about the fact that these guys aren't even being taught that, then it explains why businesses and other entrepreneurs don't see that value in these same guys, right? So when we start to talk about rehabilitation, things like that, it's not just changing the mindset of the guy who is in that situation. It's also changing the mindset of the community and the system that surrounds that guy. You know, so once those things are in sync and they both understand, and you begin to see value in a person that you didn't see value in before.
Well, it goes back to you're not when we talk about inclusion. Inclusion is not a nice terminology. It's not something nice to do. It changes communities. It changes families.
It creates real wealth and value.
Exactly. When you can take a person that might only have the opportunity to work at McDonald's for the rest of their life and put them in a thriving situation where now they're able to feed their family, pay taxes, build wealth. And it's through this pathway. I know when I talked to Jason before, you guys were I'm pointing at
There's a lot of head nodding and pointing.
Yes, talking about Mission St. Louis, that I know the parole system was looking at how small your recidivism rate was, and they were really intrigued in what you guys were doing. Are
you both seeing those kinds of numbers? Because I know that's what you're trying to do, is not only provide these opportunities, but lower recidivism.
I want to hear about from Jason's perspective about them, but I can tell you that, you know, out of everyone who's gone through Concordance Academy, not a single one has gone back to prison yet, and that's after a whole week. So we're very happy. But for real, so we're a startup ourselves,
right?
You know, so we our first class just started coming out last week, and they'll be trickling out over the next 6 weeks. And so, if you're interested in volunteering with Concordance Academy, or maybe you're an employer out there who's interested in exploring a partnership and working with some of our participants, then you should go to www.concordanceacademy.com and contact us.
That's fantastic. Yes.
Yeah, so for us, recidivism obviously being huge, period, is really important for us. And what we found is what plays the huge role in the recidivism rates that we're seeing is the relationships that we build with the guys.
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because when we got to, we need to go hang out with Jeff more, because we've been spending some quality time with Jason. But when we had a chance to hang out, you talked so eloquently about just the family aspect of the relationships you're building, and the level of trust, and like literally knocking on doors in the neighborhood around your new location to not only introduce yourself, but really start to say, we're here and we're not going anywhere. So if you're not going to come by and play ball on Tuesday night, that's fine, but we're going to be here anyway. So when you're ready, come on down. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so for us, we understand that most of the guys, when we start talking about work or even entrepreneurship, what's missing is some of the basic fundamentals that you normally get from a home. How to love, responsibility, communication, just the basic things that you learn from your parents and, interacting with your brothers and sisters and things like that. So what we're recognizing is that we need to provide that family atmosphere for guys who don't have that.
I thought that was very impactful, because when I talked to you guys before, it was like you're showing them basic things. How to set up a bank account.
Absolutely.
How do you engage with, if you have children, with the moms? How do you, it's basic levels of responsibility that might not have ever been taught.
And it's not fake to be able to cut a switch on and off, right? So that's what a lot of our guys wrestle with. I don't want to be fake. I'm real. I'm this is who I am.
Heck, I've had to learn that.
Absolutely. So I say that guys have to, I always tell guys that it's important to be a hybrid. So you need to be able to exist in different worlds. If you put me in a cage with a bunch of wolves, I'm going to be a wolf.
Right.
If you put me with a bunch of sheep, I don't have to be a wolf. Right. I can interact with the sheep like a sheep. And if the sheep start tripping, I could be a wolf with the sheep too. So it's important to know how to navigate and to adapt to those environments.
But I think that's something all of us, if you worked in corporate environments or any type of environments, you know how to navigate that environment. You know how to speak when you need to know. And I know, especially in African American neighborhoods, we always say we know how to talk, we know how to speak corporate when we need to speak corporate, and I know how to speak when I go on the corner.
Everybody know when your mama answer that phone, that voice change.
Exactly.
That mean be quiet.
Totally.
That means so much.
And code switching's real. And I joke I had to learn that because, I can be expressive. But we all have to learn it in different ways.
Christina.
Oh, Christina Di Christina would be silly. Christine Di Christina.
That's right.
My maiden name. I don't know how that became relevant. But anyway. That code switching is very, very real. And I think understanding the underlying psychological part of that, of the authenticity, this is who I am, don't try to change me, can't be overstated.
That's why it's equally important, even for those like myself who end up in those environments, that we make sure that we also push back on what it looks like to exist in the corporate world. So I'm okay with putting a suit on and putting on a tie and looking, but I'm also, you're going to find times where you don't see me like that. And I want people, I know as an African American, people see me and they have one thought, especially when they see me dressed a certain way. But when I begin to talk, it makes them respect the person that's not only African American, but that dresses in that fashion as well. To say that because you dress like that doesn't mean you can't communicate, doesn't mean you're not smart, and things like that. So.
Let's come back to that in just a second, and we're going to take a quick break.
How can our listeners begin living their lives with focus on their physical, mental, spiritual health?
Just developing a daily practice. Make a list and decide these are the things that I'm going to do because I know that when I do these things, I feel better. I would definitely recommend finding something that's uplifting or motivational that you can read or listen to every morning. We have no control over what happens once we hit the door, but we can prepare ourselves so that when we do encounter whatever arises, we're in a better emotional and mental state to deal with it.
Learn more at aliveandwellstl.com.
My name is Jason Watson. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, Walnut Park. And entrepreneur thinking to me means taking and creating something from nothing, no matter what that nothing is.
Jason, you had really touched upon the idea that you not only need to know norms, but you have the opportunity to change norms. And I think that really, we've heard a little bit of that echoed in Jeff's own experience as well. Do you guys see that playing out with others in the work that you're doing?
Absolutely. I mean, adaptability is sometimes really difficult for our guys because they've existed in one world, or what I call an 8-block radius. You've never left outside of that 8-block radius. Everybody within that 8-block radius talks the same, does the same things, goes to the same places, eats the same food, wears the same clothes. Then you get pulled out of that 8-block radius and you feel like, I'm not going to change who I am in that 8-block radius. I'm going to be exactly who I was here, the same person I was there. And then you're teaching guys to say, well, no. What you have to do is be able to exist within that 8-block radius, and when you leave it, be able to exist in that world as well. And we're seeing that with a lot of the guys that we're working with, and that so one guy, he was working with Snooks Bakery. And he gets into the environment and he has a guy who is already working, he's already hired, he's working an internship, and the guy's really talking crazy to him. So he comes to class the next day. He like, man, next time I go to work, I'm gonna leave him laying on a loaf of bread, right? What he really means is I'm gonna knock him out, right? So we get to talking, and I'm like, man, well, is there a different way? Just really trying to interact with the situation. Long story short, he goes to work the next day, and the guy's still tripping with him. He goes to the supervisor, which is a no-no in his 8-block radius, right? That's snitching, right? But the supervisor really took a liking to the fact that he handled the situation in that way. And the supervisor completely deaded the situation. And he came back, to class the following week. And, he was just really, pleased with how it turned out.
He learned that the system could work with him and for him.
Absolutely. And we made a joke from then on saying, we going to leave you on a loaf of bread. That was a joke for the rest of the class. So,
Jeff, you touched on that happening in reverse in some ways, that you've learned a whole new way of being based on your experience.
Well, certainly the norms in prison were different from those in the Missouri Senate. And when I got to, when I got there, I was given a job working on the loading dock at the warehouse. And, I got there my first day, and the CO in charge was like, look, just don't steal, and we'll make sure you all get fed better than anybody else, back on the yard. And so I watched everybody near the end of the first day, and they were all like saran wrapping chicken patties to their chest and green peppers to their legs. And I was thinking, my God, and it took me a while to understand, but like they didn't have anything. They were destitute, and they needed a hustle. Everyone in prison pretty much develops a hustle to survive. And so even though the warehouse work was probably the most arduous job on the yard, because we had to move about 40,000 pounds of food in and out every day, it was one of the most desirable for those who looked for a hustle, because you could sell you had goods. Yeah, you had stuff you could sell, back when you got to the yard. And I was faced with the situation where they figured that I was going to rat them out after the first week, because I was the only one not stealing. And I'll never forget waiting for the COs in charge to take a bathroom break and a smoke break, and just saran wrapping some onions and green peppers to my chest.
That was your norm.
And something that smells.
And I remember I came back to the yard, and we got back to the unit, and I waited till the COs were out of sight, and I opened my jacket and showed the other guys that I worked with. And I'll never forget what this one guy said. He said, "Damn," he said, "the Senator be embezzling." But it was just a way, to show that, like,
how you have to acclimate.
You do what you need to do.
And trust. I mean, the bottom line in all those situations was trust. He had to trust that working with the system and going to a supervisor would work. You had to build trust so that you could legitimize your role in the situation. And, of course, there's no way
I could go to a supervisor.
No, totally different situation.
So, yeah, it's just about figuring out ways to navigate the world that you're in. And I love the story you told about I'm going to have to use the loaf of bread line. In prison, they said, I'm going to give you $1.50, which meant
absolutely
150 stitches. But I like the loaf of bread.
Yeah. It's interesting because most don't understand what guys are faced up against. Right. So it seems like, man, you're here to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and things like that. And it's like, well, I don't have boots. So we have one guy who was in our program, and he actually didn't graduate, but really good guy, man. He did 14 years in the penitentiary. Got locked up when he was about 18 years old. So pretty much all of his life he was in the penitentiary. Gets out, comes to our program, has a desire to cut hair. Great barber, but doesn't have a license, any of that. He's on probation. And he comes to class one day and he's limping. And I'm like, what's wrong, man? I could tell something is wrong. So I walk up to him. I'm like, man, what's going on? I could tell he don't really want to tell me. I'm like, it's cool. You ain't got to tell me, So he pull up his leg, and it's a bandage. And he like, I got shot last night. I'm like, man, you serious? I'm like, you ain't go to the hospital? He like, no. Right? I'm like, why you ain't go to the hospital? He like, because I'm on probation. I wasn't supposed to be on my front porch. I got shot, so I'm not.
I got to deal with the consequences.
I just got to deal with the. And I'm like, wow, man, you need to go to the hospital.
You can lose your leg.
You're going to lose your leg.
Or your life.
Exactly. So he's faced up with this fear of not going back to prison. He hadn't necessarily done anything wrong. He just was on his front porch, ended up getting shot, and felt like, man, I got to push through this, So a lot of our guys are faced with circumstances that we don't even understand. When you watch a guy one of our guys was 18 years old. He watched his best friend get shot in his head, and he'll tell a story and say his brains flew in my mouth. Like, what do you? Right. That's a set of circumstances. You talk about PTSD. Right. See exactly. how you act after somebody's brains end up
showing up on time for work every day is probably the least of your concerns at that point.
Absolutely.
So how do you guys both? How do you take individuals that have experienced, varying levels of, family issues, relationship issues. They might have children. Issues. How do you take that and focus individuals so that they're focused on not just reentering the community, but being productive and looking at building new ventures?
So a couple things. First of all, I think it's what really has amazed me both inside a prison and then doing this work is just the unbelievable aspiration that these guys bring to the table. They come out, one of our first guys came out and, we're trying to think like, well, should we hook him up with some warehouse work or, what kind of like low-level, entry-level job? And he's like, no, I want to code. I want to be a coder. And we had been talking to Launch Code about partnering. And he's just like, look, I've done some of this stuff before I got locked up. I know I can do it again. That's my dream. It's like it's inspiring every day. Yes. One of the next guys who came out, he wants to be an architect. He was one of those guys. Another of the big hustles in prison is people, they draw portraits of other guys, girlfriends or moms or daughters to be sent home on Valentine's Day or a birthday, for 5 stamps, 6 stamps or whatever. And that's how people, survive. And he's apparently an amazing artist and wants to draw, plans for buildings. And so we're going to have an architect come in and talk to him. That's part of our program. We call it Industry Insights, to have successful people in different fields come in and say, this is what you need to do to build a foundation to reach that goal. So I think that's something important to recognize. And the second thing, how do we get them there? I think the first step, and I think Jason's, talked about this a lot in terms of relationship building, just do what you say you're going to do. We're talking about people who have spent their lives, sadly, with dealing with broken promises, from like maybe a father who said, I'll be back, next week, I'll be back, and never saw him again. Right. And so, of course, you're going to distrust the world. Of course, you're going to be skeptical. And so we knew going in, because the first thing these guys said over and over when we first interviewed to say, do you want to be a part of this, was, why would you want to help me? Right. And isn't that sad that they don't feel like they were worthy of help? Exactly. But now that we've, been with them for 6 months, 7 months, and we're just trying to do what we said we would do, we're starting to see that trust develop. So
that's good. I think there's 2 pieces to that question. One is, first, we recognize that a lot of guys coming from our environments do have difficult backgrounds, have come from difficult places. The other piece is that narrative isn't true for everybody inner city. Right. So we want to make sure that we're clear and people understand that inner city does not mean broken, desolate and down and out. Right. So there are people in the city who are homeowners, who have grown up with great parents, who have spent their whole lives investing in our society, investing in our communities, and they have children that have a heartbeat to do the same. So
and other people left and they stayed, and
absolutely,
no doubt.
Absolutely, and we're saying that range is real. So we're dealing with the entire gambit. So to answer that question, I say, one, recognizing that every person is an individual, right. So you're not a number, and that's the difficulty with corporate America or grants or things like that. It's about numbers. It's about getting 1, 2, 3 to 4, and people want numbers. You know what I mean? People respond differently in situations. They react. So first thing is understanding that you're an individual. I don't see you as a group. I don't see you as a gang.
Or
I don't
stereotype.
See you as exactly. You are a person. So what I want to do first, the thing that makes you feel valuable, is that I get to know you. I don't assume this is how you are. We always say the big thing is, I don't have to trust you. I'm going to let you teach me what trust in you looks like. So I'm not going to base anything off what you've done before. I'm going to look at you for who you are now and what you're going to prove to me.
It's a clean slate, and like you said,
which rarely actually occurs after someone has done what they needed to do to make right with what whatever they had
Well,
done.
everything concerning the system is based off what they've done, right? So the relationship piece is hugely important. Communication, like talking with guys. Man, letting guys yell. Sometimes, like, just because I'm yelling don't mean that I'm ready to beat you up.
Right.
It just means I might be a little bit more aggressive than somebody else. So we have those matches, like, let's go, you know. And after we dap each other up and it's all love. So recognizing that I understand where you come from. I understand that y'all all might communicate differently.
Right.
And we want to be understanding of those realities.
So we talked about that myth of the bootstrap, and that does a lot of damage to everybody in our society.
Sure.
And I think that just acknowledge individual hands-on way. But Cheryl and I also have the opportunity to work within that, what we call that larger ecosystem, particularly the entrepreneurship ecosystem in St. Louis. And one of our goals is to make sure that it's less disconnected, more connected in what we're doing. So when you look out at St. Louis, the activity that's happening in different parts of the city around different industries, whether that's coding and bioscience and all that, and you look at the men and women coming through your programs, where is that intersection? How can we be of service? What do you need from that ecosystem? How might it be different than what other entrepreneurs need? Tell us a little bit more about what that looks like.
Very good question. That's one of the reasons we're right on Grand and Sullivan, because those things typically don't exist right in the heart of the city. No, they don't. Right? So I would say the first thing is, for anybody that's listening, that's involved in entrepreneurship, that's a business owner, I would say, man, you have to build you have to be willing to give opportunities. And I'm not saying a handout.
Right.
I'm saying that somebody who seems to be honest and really want to do something different with their lives, give opportunity. Number two, I would say investment. Investment in guys that come from these environments, women that come from these environments. And then and three, being willing to build things within the city that look like what exists downtown or looks like what exists in the Tower Grove area. And one of our heartbeats for being where we are is we want guys that come from that community. Here's the reality. A guy who walks into a building and everybody looks like corporate America, nobody looks like him, he immediately feels like, I don't belong in this place.
Right. Seeing yourself is so important.
Seeing yourself is really, really important. So we want to be in a place where those guys feel comfortable. So my challenge would be, I know most people, we know about the Delmore Divide. Most people don't want to drive past Delmore. But I encourage you to come and find and search and, build relationships with these guys. Last piece I'll say is we have a mentorship piece to our program where every guy gets someone that they meet with for an hour a week that mentors that guy. And it may be an old white guy from the suburbs. And we believe that we've provided some type of racial reconciliation, because here it is, you have a guy from the inner city, somebody from the, they both have an unconscious bias about each other.
They both have their own 6 blocks.
Absolutely. Then they become friends, and it's like, wow.
It's heart to heart. It's your heart touching another heart.
Oh, man.
Without anything else in between. That's powerful.
If we want to see change in our city,
yes,
and we know the biggest issue that exists within our city is racially and economically. If we want to see those things change, we have to be willing to enter into one another's narrative. The biggest fear is that the person that owns the business doesn't want to spend time with the guy who sells the drugs.
Right.
But we want to criticize one another, and the guy who sells drugs wants to criticize the guy who owns the business. You enter into one another's narrative, and then you say, wow. And
you're breaking down the barriers. You're breaking down the stereotypes. You're breaking down all of that. This is what I think is so powerful. What you got? Talk to us about, before we run out of time, hatchery, and then Jeff, programs that you're involved with, so our listeners have an opportunity to know, how can we get involved? How can we help with the programming that you guys are involved with?
Absolutely. So with Hatch Enterprises, just really brief, our heartbeat is taking men and women who have some entrepreneurial aptitude, who have some type of desire to start something, or maybe they already know what they want to start. We handle all of the back end, everything from payroll to taxes, branding. Wow. Doing a brand brief with guys, trying to make those business mentor connections, so the guys have a mentor in the business field that can walk with them and, they can call on and be there for us. So we want to remove all of the back end so that they could just go do the work.
So for everybody listening out there, if you have a skill in one of those areas, accounting, marketing, finance, please step up and call and get involved, because this is how we change environments.
This is also how you get involved in the entrepreneurship ecosystem.
Yes.
If anybody's out there that has some, branding, accounting, and you just like, man, I would love to give back in some way, shape, form, or fashion. We're not saying give us money, although if you want to do that, that's great too.
Of course.
You can definitely go to missionstlouis.org and just send us some type of message. Trust me, I will find you. I will hunt you down, and we will have great conversations.
Fantastic.
He'll lay you on a loaf of bread.
That's only if you don't do what you say you're going to do.
Absolutely.
So let me, if you don't mind, answer kind of the last two questions. The first one, what can businesses do and what can businesses recognize in entrepreneurs? The first is just the unbelievable ingenuity that characterizes the lifestyle of people who live on the margins. In prison, I watch people cut hair perfectly with toenail clippers. I watch people craft weights during a lockdown where they close down the weight pile out of sticks, boulders, and two laundry bags, and use that. Or people just never leave their cell. And
that's called design thinking in our world. And, we need to recognize it in other people's contexts as well.
Right. Yeah. So that's the first thing. Second thing is that if you hire people who have been on the margins, especially people with felony convictions, you're going to get some of the most grateful employees you've ever had, because most understand that it's almost impossible to get a second chance in this society. And that's not just me talking. Research shows that people who are formerly incarcerated in the workplace are less likely to be involved in no more likely to be involved in any workplace incident than people who weren't incarcerated, and actually are more likely to get promoted to higher positions. Second thing is that people should recognize that, hey, in our country, there's a long history of the things that are being in fashion, whether it's hip hop or certain kinds of clothes, it starts with the urban areas. So if you want to sell more of your products or be able to message to the people in a country that's changing rapidly, where the demographics are changing rapidly, you need to find people who can speak to those communities. And then last, about Concordance, we do something a little similar. Y'all do one-on-one mentoring. We do teams of 5, volunteer teams of 5 that basically just surround our participants with love and emotional support and mentorship and resources to connect them to, people and places in the community that can benefit them. So if you're interested in being part of a volunteer partnership team, again, go to www.concordanceacademy.com and I will find you.
Let me
fabulous.
say one more piece.
Yes,
I think
take
one
it
thing
home.
that's really, really important is recognizing that people are needed and not needy. Right? So most people who want to help, who want to do things in these environments, it's like, oh, poor people. Right. And it's like, no, that's the wrong heartbeat. So what I'm challenging most businesses and entrepreneurs to understand is that these are people you need. Yes. These are people that are valuable assets to your companies, to your businesses. And when you see those people like that, it'll change the way that you're willing to not only engage with them, but provide opportunities to them, because you're not looking at them like poor them. Let me do something, like they need you, but you flip the script and say, I need them, and they have something that they can add and bring value to.
That's a great way to end this.
We can't thank you enough for spending time with us, sharing your stories, sharing about your organizations and the work you're doing, and really everything you're investing in the men and women of our community to make it better and stronger. So thank you.
And we'd like one time, maybe in the future, maybe you come back with one of your entrepreneurs and we can have that conversation, not only with you guys again, but with some of the benefactors that from the wonderful work that you're doing.
I was going to bring a guy with me. He's entrepreneuring this morning.
Wonderful. Let him go entrepreneur. I love it. Well, thank you again.
Yes. Have a good one, guys. Take care.
Changing the way you view new ventures, igniting your thinking about entrepreneurship, It's entrepreneurially thinking. Get connected and discover more. Visit our website for show notes, resources, information about our guests, upcoming events, and of course, all your favorite episodes. If you have any questions, be sure to leave them for us in the comment sections, and be sure to leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes. The best way to show love is to share. Let everybody know that you're thinking entrepreneurially. So visit our website, entrepreneuriallythinking.com. #ETHINKSTL. Entrepreneurially Thinking is another positive production of RareGem Productions. Thanks for listening.